This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on India's commitment for clean energy transitions under India's G20 presidency. The participants are Narendra Taneja, energy expert, and Gaurav Dhawanlal, anchor.
Hello and welcome to our program. The G20 Energy Transition Working Group Committee has broadly agreed on universal access to modern and sustainable energy and its priority in energy transition. In fact, India has been working on its energy transition. It is embracing the power of renewable energy and has already announced its aim to reach net zero emissions by 2070. We are delighted to have in the studio with us Mr. Narendra Taneja, who is an energy expert, and today our conversation with Mr. Taneja is going to focus on India's commitment for clean energy transitions under India's G20 presidency. Narendraji, when we talk of energy transition, we talk of India's leadership, and we are making, I think, clear announcements wherever the Prime Minister is traveling to say India is committed to green energy. In terms of our presidency of the G20, how has this been received and what are some major steps that we have taken?
Well, good question. First of all, let me explain what is for your listeners, what is energy transition. You see, when you look at India for that matter around the world, energy that's consumed broad by and large is actually known as conventional energy. That means coal, oil, natural gas, and so on. So in the energy world, it's called conventional energy. And when you look at the global economy, including India, the world is by and large, a kind of fossil fuel economy.
Right.
Now, because of these emissions and the challenge of global warming and all that, various platforms, global platforms, and the world public opinion as a whole decided to go for a renewable energy. So this moving from fossil fuels, fossil economy to renewable economy on renewable energy is known as transition. So for some countries, the transition may take longer. For other countries, it might take, less time. But this is the kind of the path that India has chosen. That's the path world as a whole has, chosen. So when you look at India, especially in the context of the G20, India has renewed its focus now on reducing, number one, overall carbon footprint. And number two is to fast track commitments India made in Paris, that's in terms of sustainable development goals or known as SDGs. When you look at SDGs and plus the overall India's initiative, we are basically moving now in the direction of renewable energy and to bring a green energy revolution as a whole. India has set ambitious target in terms of renewables, that is in the region of 500 gigawatt in installed renewed energy capacity by 2030, which means within the next 7 years. And if you look at the breakup, it's like 280 gigawatt is for solar and 140 gigawatt is wind energy. So overall, if you look at it, that's the India's kind of target, which commitment which India has made both G20 chair and also, during various other intergovernmental and other climate summit. But when you look at the kind of our track record, what we promised and what we have already achieved and compare it, let's say with the developed countries, actually we are doing better than most developed countries, and our track record in terms of walking the talk, is actually much better than most developed countries and of course the best when it comes to the global south or the developed.
Mr. Taneja, in terms of India's commitment to renewable energy, you are very categorically always stated earlier that it's a tremendous commitment vis-a-vis our carbon footprint, which is also really not as large as our commitment is. So why do you think we have been committing so in such a huge step to say that yes, we want to go green despite us not being very major contributors to global warming?
Well, exactly as you pointed out, when you look at the commitment that we have made in terms of, green energy revolution, we are among the top 3 or 4. Now, there are two reasons for that. Number one is when you look at India's traditional value system in terms of environment, ecology, mountains, rivers, oceans, forests and all that. India has always looked upon, these kind of gifts of nature. And in most cases, most parts of our society, we actually worship forests, we worship rivers, we worship mountains, we worship oceans. So that's much before the world environment was even born, we actually have shown or we have had this respect for environment and ecology. Now, that is number one. Number two is that we are a densely populated country, unlike the United States, or for that matter, even China or Russia and another country. Therefore, when you look at the overall welfare of the people and prosperity in a more broader sense, it is important that we make sure that our people, while we are doing economically well, that we also make sure that people have access to clean air, they have access to clean water, they have access to clean rivers, they have access to healthy mountains and oceans and so on and so forth. So I think it comes from India's deep-rooted and ancient way of looking at all these things, that we have decided to go ahead, actually much beyond what we committed in Paris, and make sure that we move in that direction and make sure India emerges as a kind of true leader in this field. And that's why you look at, for instance, commitments being made by India at various G20 platforms or speeches by our Prime Minister, or for that matter, the national vision, that these things, actually we are doing more than, for instance, than most developed countries are doing in this direction. And as I said, it has more to do, with that we want to develop, and we want to develop in a sustainable manner. And at the same time, we make sure that as we develop economically and industrially, that we also take care of the health of the people, health of our environment, health of our rivers, health of our oceans, and so on and so forth. So I think it comes more from that. That's why when you look at, for instance, the commitment we made in terms of solar energy, we made commitment of 280 gigawatts. That's by 2030. But when you look at what we have already achieved, I think probably we'll get to this target maybe before 2029, at least 1 year before 2030, the commitment that is made. And in fact, now the idea is actually to invest even more in research and development, that we can convert that into a kind of grassroots revolution which is already happening, so that we can actually get there even faster. And under the India's leadership and the French, together with France, India is leading this kind of movement which is known as the International Solar Alliance, and helping other developing countries also in terms of solar power revolution. So I think we are taking lead on the one hand, and at the same time at home, we are doing it to show to the world our commitment, but also to make sure that as we grow and we go to become a developed country, we do it in such a manner that not only economy, but the health of practically everything that we depend on, or everything that is given to us by nature, is also well looked after.
Right. And in fact, when we look at leadership and its different connotations, one of them is about inspiring. So with this holistic vision, with this vision to say we are a developing country and yet we are making these commitments in the hope of inspiring other nations who are actually, their contribution to the carbon footprint, their footprint is larger.
Absolutely.
And maybe walk the talk. They should also be walking the talk, right? When we talk of transition, Mr. Taneja, what about the cost, the financing of this transition?
We are a developing country. We are 1.4 billion people, and most developing countries today, known as the Global South, they look upon India now to be their voice, because many of these countries are too small, or they don't have the right kind of diplomatic skills or the capacity, to basically put this on the global high table.
Right.
So they expect India, and they want India to do that. And India is doing it. Wherever our Prime Minister was in Paris recently, and he talked about this issue. He was in Washington, D.C., talked about the same issue. In G20, practically every conference, India is raising this issue and is emerging as the voice of the Global South, which means voice of, all developing countries. And if you look at the voice that India is actually putting on the table, or the arguments India is putting on the table, number one is finance. Because when it comes to transition, even rich countries of the global north, like in Europe and America and OECD countries, even they sometimes kind of complain that they're struggling with money, because the money that you need, the mountains of money that you need to transit from conventional to renewable is massive. Now imagine that kind of challenge for developing countries. So India is always putting that, look, rich countries, the global north has made commitment during various COP summits that they would provide $100 billion every year. And if you look at the total sum, which is now, it is more than $1 trillion that they owe to the developing countries, for this transition. They have failed to walk the talk. So India keeps pointing out, and at the same time do it in such a way to involve them, so that they understand that if the developing countries are not able to fast track this transition from conventional to renewables, the entire world will suffer. So India is always encouraging them, engaging with the rich countries, that you provide finance on, first of all, this $1 trillion that they owe, and more than that, on whatever terms that can be negotiated. Secondly, also provide technology. 99% technology that's needed in the, for the transition is with the developed countries, with the rich countries.
Right.
And they ask, So India is also, working on that. At the same time, wherever possible, India is holding hands of several developing countries under Indian Solar Alliance alliance, and also bilateral ways in terms of, helping them set up solar power plants or wind farms and so on and so forth. So I think a lot of work is going on, and though India has many challenges because we are still a developing country, but still when you look, for instance, what India has not only promised, what India is able to do, I think is tremendous and is now being increasingly at least recognized by the global north.
Do you think that you'd earlier mentioned about research and development and, we have some of the sharpest brains in the world and the most creative ones. So we are putting enough money into R&D also?
Well, yes. In fact, when you look at, for instance, number of startups that we have in India now dedicated to renewable energy, dedicated to new sources of energy, I think is a lot of work is happening in the private sector. When it comes to the government sector or the government incentive, look at, for instance, the green energy, look at solar, look at wind, look at, for instance, even, using coal in such a way that the contamination is minimum possible, etc. I think a lot of it. But at the same time, when you look at, for instance, moving the entire economy of $3.6 trillion, that India's economy on the nominal basis, and if you go on PPP basis, India today is $12.5 trillion economy and the third largest economy in the world already on PP. On nominal, of course, we are the fifth largest economy. So moving, such a massive economy, huge economy from conventional to renewable, you need trillions of dollars. Trillions. So I think that's what world needs to understand, because we are 1.4 billion people, one of the largest economies in the world. And if we are able to do it successfully and in a time-bound manner, kind of milestones which we have already identified and actually shared with the world, I think is going to not only help India, is going to help the world. Same goes for Africa. Africa alone needs $2 trillion for this transition. So I think it's important to understand, that how the transition in India and or for that matter in Africa is going to help not only Africa or India for that matter, other developing countries, but actually the developed countries. Because when we go for this transition and we are able to bring down CO2 emissions, that's going to help the entire planet. And in the process will also help these countries, because at the end of the day, wherever technology is, for instance, being used, developed countries, because they are the one who have got the maximum labs for that, they will also be the beneficiaries.
And talking at a regional level, we are looked at as a regional leader, definitely. And in this region, there are many countries where population is high, energy consumption is high, and we're already making a difference. So transfer of technology from India to other neighboring countries, that's happening?
Well, good question. First of all, you see, we are yes, a regional leader, of course. We have great relations with Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, and we have got a lot going on in terms of energy engagements. For instance, with Nepal, look at, for instance, our energy engagements with Bhutan. We buy a lot of hydropower from them. With Bangladesh, we have built a gas pipeline. We are now participating in a nuclear power plant also. We are also helping them, a number of other energy associated projects. And the same goes for Sri Lanka and for other countries in the region. It used to be also Afghanistan before Taliban's moved in there. So, and we have also offered wherever we can help, for instance, other countries. But that said, at the same time, you see, India is now a global leader. As I said, we are the third largest economy in the world on PPP, and we are a major player in terms of energy, major player in terms of software technology in particular, and also a very significant player in nuclear technology, and increasingly emerging as a kind of an important player in the solar power. So I think, we have become a global leader now, and therefore we are playing a bigger role in the region, and of course, as I said, also within the global south, but at the same time engaging with like-minded countries in the global north, such as America, such as, France and Germany and Japan, and working so that, we can do it, of course, between ourselves, but at the same time for countries in South Asia and also countries beyond South Asia, most particularly in Africa and Latin America, the countries with which we enjoy a good relation. But the challenge is that because the task is big and the money needed is like mountains and mountains and mountains, this is going to be a kind of partnership with developed countries on the one hand, partnership with developing countries on the other, and with multinational organizations, so on and so forth. So I think, as I said, when you have to transform the entire economy from conventional to renewable, you are talking of a massive task.
Absolutely. Mr. Narendra Taneja, helping us understand that to walk talk as a leader, holding the presidency this year for G20, I think inspirational leadership, that's the way, and India is definitely leading the way, whether it's energy or the other areas of development. Thank you so much for coming on to our program.
Thanks for having me.
You were listening to a discussion on India's commitment for clean energy transitions under India's G20 presidency. The participants were Narendra Taneja, energy expert, and Gaura Dhawanlal, anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 928-909-4044.